The DJI Action 5 Pro has been all over the internet, all over YouTube. Everybody loves this camera, just like the Pocket 3. Now, the biggest question that I've seen on YouTube videos and forums and Facebook groups is, do you really need an ND filter for the Action 5 Pro, or do you just use it on auto? Now, I've explored many of those videos and I've done my own testing, and I am pleased to say that I found the answer. And the short answer is yes, you do need some sort of ND filters. And today I'm going to be telling you exactly why and showing you why with the Freewell all-day standard pack, which comes with an ND8 all the way through an ND64 polarized, and we even have a glow mist to test out. So let's get this video started. What's going on, guys? This is Eddie, aka Mr. Eddie Nunez. Welcome back to another video. Thank you so much for hitting that play button. Just like I shared at the beginning of the video, we're going to be doing a quick unboxing of the Freewell filters, but we're also going to be doing various tests with the filters installed on the Action 5 Pro versus just having it with a straight up auto shutter, letting that shutter crank all the way up high, because today is a really bright day here in New York City. Now, I've always used ND filters on all my devices, whether it's the Pocket 3, any sort of action camera, even on my FPV drones. And today, actually, we're going to be showcasing the example of the Action 5 on my bike, and you're going to get to see like what it looks like with motion blur, without motion blur. And we'll also even install it, I should say, on the drone itself with a filter on, and show you the difference as well. Because I think motion blur just gives your video this whole different dynamic. It's okay to use a camera in straight up auto settings and not use an ND filter. That's totally fine. No one is saying that you must have an ND filter installed on a camera such as an action camera. But if you want to take your videos to a whole new level and you want to get sort of that cinematic look that has that motion blur that we're all used to, ND filters is a must. There is no other way to achieve that motion blur, because none of these cameras have a variable aperture. This is a fixed aperture. This is at an f2.8. So there you go. You can't adjust it all. All you could do is adjust your ISO, which you want to keep at 100, and probably crank up the shutter all the way to, God knows, like on a day like today, probably 1,000 or 2,000. So here I have with me two different packs. I have the Bright Day pack, which is polarizing, and polarizing is cool because it's going to eliminate some of the reflections. And then here you have the here you have the standard day pack, the standard 4 pack, and this is the same as the Bright Day pack. The only difference is that if you notice, after the ND and the numerical value, it doesn't have the PL on there, which means that it's not polarized. And then if you're into like stylistic looks, this is a diffusion glow mist, which will give you sort of a softer image. And some people like using this from like a creative standpoint, but we're gonna probably just test this out as well as we kind of navigate through this video. So let me unbox this. It's really, really easy to install, unlike other action cameras where you have to like completely remove something. This is really easy. I've actually been using it already. Just like anything Freewell related, this comes with a great little carrying case where you can conveniently store your filters. And of course, you get the Freewell microfiber cloth. They include this stuff with any like thing that you order. Even like this mist, I bet you has a filter. And here you go. This is the case itself and the contents of the case. So you have the 4 filters right in this case, and those 4 filters, as I mentioned, is all the way from that ND8 all the way up to that 64. So on the Action 5 or even the Action 4 Pro, that's one thing I want to mention. This is good. These filters are good for the Action 4 and the Action 3, 4, and 5. So that nothing has really changed with DJI's designs. But to go ahead and use this, all you got to do is remove this little rubber gasket that the lens has, and then you just install it. So today we're going to go ahead and use an Insta360, and I'm using the polarizing, and all you're going to do is literally just put it right over the top here, just like so. So I literally just put it right over the top, and there goes the filter, and it looks good because it makes your camera look sort of like a little cinema rig, if you will, just because that ND. This is an ND32, as I already mentioned, and I think today this will be the perfect choice. Now, in terms of settings, when you go on your Action 5, if you're using an ND filter, I recommend that you lock in your exposure. So what I would probably do is leave my ISO on auto. I'll probably have it into a range, meaning that I'll probably set the range from 100 minimum to 400 maximum, because you want to make sure that you're able to compensate for the darker areas. If you're like vlogging, or you're in a cloudy environment and clouds are covering the sun, and your exposure is going to constantly change. But what I would do differently is that I would absolutely lock the shutter at 1/60, because I'm a 30 frames per second shooter. So shutter at 1/60, and ISO on auto with a minimum and maximum value. That's what I would do differently, as opposed to just leaving everything auto. If you're not going to be using the ND filter at all, what I would do is just leave everything on auto. Leave your shutter on auto, leave your ISO on auto. You can actually even lock in your ISO, actually, now that I think about it, if you are in a outdoor environment or a well-lit area, you can just leave your shutter on auto and just leave your ISO locked. Now, the difference is you're not going to get any motion blur by leaving your shutter completely on auto, and that's the whole point of these filters, is that we want to get some, realistic motion blur, just like how we're used to seeing it. And we also want to get control over our, exposure. So these are essentially sunglasses. That's what we're doing. We're adding a sunglass on the actual lens. So let me go ahead and show you some examples. We're going to go ahead and ride the bike. We're going to do multiple examples where I'm riding my bike. I'm going to mount this in the front of my e-bike, and we're going to do auto, and then we're going to lock the exposure, and you're going to get to see sort of that difference in motion blur. All right, so this is an example of using the Action 5 Pro in terms of vlogging with a locked shutter. So right now I have my shutter locked. My ISO, as I mentioned, is going to remain on auto, and I have it auto with a set range. And then here is the filter installed. And if I were to remove the filter, I am going to be completely blown out, because obviously I have my shutter locked. But the benefit of that is that you have a different cinematic experience, because you're getting motion blur. Like right now, if I move my hands, you should see that you should see motion blur overall. And these trees that behind me, I thought they were going to be moving more, but that's not a good example of motion blur. Stick around, because there is going to be a better example of motion blur once I get on the bike or get on, fly the drone. You've probably already seen bits and pieces of that as part of my introduction. Now, let me show you on the other hand, with the filter removed, what does that look like, and the difference of no shutter. And even really quickly, if I were to maybe even move around, there might be motion blur, but I'm not going that fast to just walking. So I highly doubt that there'll be any sort of motion blur. So let me go ahead and take off this filter and show you vlogging style what that means without motion blur. So this right here is automatic shutter speed. So I'm doing the same thing with my hand, and you should probably see my hand very, very jittery with no motion blur. And even if I were to walk around, I'm not sure if that makes a difference or not. The really cool thing about this, as I mentioned earlier, is that it just makes it easier, because like if you're vlogging and stuff, you don't have to go into settings, you don't have to dial things in. But you know, you might not get that sort of cinematic perspective, and the view is totally different. But as I mentioned, you're also able to benefit from a filter even on auto. So I'm gonna go ahead and slap this right over the camera, and what that's gonna do is it's going to reduce the shutter count. So my shutter count, can't see it right now, but my shutter count, let's say as an example, hypothetically speaking, before was probably at 1/2000. Now my shutter speed is probably along the line of maybe 1/800. So still not that 180 degree rule, but close enough, and closer to that 180 degree rule. So just wanted to show you that as well. All right, so the test we're gonna do now is I'm gonna hop on my bike here, and for the purpose of this video, I'm going to stick with the ND32 on. And again, I'm shooting at 30 frames per second, so my shutter is gonna be 1/60, and my ISO is gonna be locked at 100, because one of the downsides of the Action 5 Pro is that the range is ISO 100 to 800, whereas on the Pocket 3, you have that flexibility of 100 to 400. 800 to me on an action camera is probably too grainy, although I don't think the camera will go that high up anyway. But one thing I did discover is that if you do connect to the Mimo app for some reason, you're able to set that range lower to 400 if you want. So that's pretty strange. So let's hop on the bike and I'll show you that example of motion blur on a bike. And then we'll go to another location and show you an example with the FPV drone. So one of the cool features of using a polarizing filter is that you don't see any reflections from the sun and things such as water. So right now we are at this docking station, and I'm gonna show you there's not gonna be any reflections here on this water. All right, so now we are gonna do something a little bit differently at this part of the video. I actually switched now to an ND16, and even with an ND16, I should have gone ND8. I have the ISO right now at 200 because an ND16 at ISO 100 was just a little bit too dark, so I had to bump that up to 200. The other alternative was to then switch to an ND8, but that's the problem when using ND filters, is that you have to kind of like, you know, kind of tinker with them and fiddle with them going back and forth. Anyway, right now we're gonna go ahead and fly the FPV drone. I'm gonna mount the action camera to this Axis Flying Mantis 5-inch. I'm going to then do a couple of tweaks to the GoPro as well, which is not going to interfere with the motion blur, but what I am gonna do, just to share with you, is that I am going to turn off stabilization. I'm going to change to 4:3 instead of 16:9, and I'm also going to change the angle to wide. That way I can stabilize my footage in gyro flow. So let's go ahead and put this up in the air, and we're gonna do comparisons as well with ND filter and without an ND filter, straight auto without ND filter, and you be the judge what you think looks best. There are clouds rolling by, so exposure is going to change, so that's going to be quite interesting, but this is a test, so you know, whatever the output is, you'll see here. So let's get to flying. All right, there you have it. That is the Freewell filters for the Action 5 Pro. Let me know what you thought about the video. Did you prefer the video style with a filter, with the control of exposure, or do you prefer just using your camera on completely auto? I completely understand people that want to do complete auto because it's less kind of like dialing in settings and changing and stuff. But even if you keep your camera on auto, I think there's value to filters, because at the end of the day, you're going to be decreasing your shutter count overall, your shutter speed, I should say, overall. So that's the whole purpose of this. So if I was going to use this camera at complete auto, I'll probably slap on an ND, you know, maybe like 16 today, just to kind of help that shutter get closer to that 180-degree rule. But overall, really highly impressed with the filters from Freewell. I use them on all my devices, on my Pocket 3, on my Sony mirrorless cameras, on my Canon cameras. There's really good color quality. You don't really see a change in shift or hue, and you don't see any vignetting, obviously, because these are not variable. That's one thing that I would love to see Freewell do, is sort of maybe a variable filter for action cameras. They do it now for the actual like mirrorless cameras. We'd love to see it for action cameras. But anyway, that's going to be it for today. Let me know how you like this. And until next time, peace. It's way too loud here in the city today, but spring is coming. So let's just continue to have fun. Later.